an item?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Chair, we're live.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Housing and Land Board. The agenda and papers which have been circulated. Can I refer you to that agenda? And firstly, are there any apologies for absence? Do we have any, Carl?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Keith Alcock from Sandwell, Councillor Lisa Trickett from Birmingham, Councillor Julie Jackson from Nuneaton and Bedworth, with Councillor Ian Lloyd substituting for Councillor Jackson. And then apologies also from Grant Stowman from Warwickshire County, Jill Hamer, Marches Lep, Isha Bart, Combined Authority, Mark Ryder, Warwickshire County, and Simon Tranter from Walsall, Metropolitan Borough.
Thank you. Do we have any notification of substitutes other than those you've just mentioned, Carl?
No, Chair.
Right. Moving on to declaration of interest. This is a point in the agenda for members of the public where any officer or member of this meeting has a declaration of interest by way of financial connections or anything of that nature, whether that be him or her or family. Do we have any such declaration of interest? No. Okay. The minutes of the meeting have been circulated from the last meeting. Are we content that those are correct record?
Chair, may I ask a quick question about that? It's Councillor Sweetman, Wolverhampton Council.
You can indeed.
Thank you, sir. At the last meeting in November, I think it was, I was unable to attend. My apologies have been recorded. Thank you for that. But I had put in a substitute, our cabinet member for City Economy, Councillor Simpkins. I don't know whether our protocol is different in some way, but I notice the substitute has not been mentioned in the minutes. Is that normal for this committee, or can we correct that?
It would be normal at the beginning, as you've just heard from Carl, to say that whoever was substituting will be indicated in that section. If that wasn't done, we can correct that.
If you could, just for the record, just for good provenance.
Chair,
Yes, Carl.
I wasn't at the meeting, but if memory serves correct, we hadn't been notified of the substitution, and in fact, the link wasn't provided on that basis, and therefore Councillor Simpkins was not in attendance, so was not recorded for that reason.
I thought to myself he wasn't there. I would have remembered.
Attendance. Sorry, Chair, did you say Councillor Simpkins wasn't in attendance?
I said I don't recall him being there, but I think Carl is confirming my understanding. I would have remembered if Steve was there.
Okay, well, I apologise if I'd understood that he had.
No.
That's fine. I can make sure. But I had thought, because I knew well in advance I wasn't able to make this meeting, and I wanted to make sure that Wolverhampton had proper representation. But I will double check that, Chair. Thank you anyway.
Thank you. Your presence today is much appreciated, Jacqueline. Right. Moving on then, we approve the minutes. I've got a nod of assent from there. Affordable housing delivery vehicle. This is coming back from the overview and scrutiny committee, which in itself was interesting. Gareth.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure, Tim and Carl, whether this is the time at which you read out the overview and scrutiny points relating to the call-in item for this vehicle. So could you just clarify that before I introduce the item? Tim?
Yeah, it would be useful just to do that, Gareth, because I think it's been, unfortunately, because of other commitments, it's been impossible for Councillor Trickett or Councillor Bayton, Chair and Vice Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, to actually attend this meeting. So I know that the report does pick up the point and respond to the points, but it would be helpful, and just for the purposes of regularity, it would be really good to have those noted down. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be great.
Okay, Chair, we were assuming that governance would do this because it was an item coming from overview and scrutiny rather than us presenting the report.
Right. Right. Dan, can you help with this? Sorry, I haven't got that in front of me.
Chair, it's Rob here. I've got the comment back from the scrutiny committee that I can copy into
Rob. That'd be interesting.
Into the chat on the feed. So I'll do that now.
Mike, is that okay if Rob reads out those points.
Please do, yeah, because it was a bit of a bizarre meeting as far as I was concerned. I think I did take up with Tim that if it was on our agenda last time, as you may recall, to be noted as it was work in progress. But, you know, the decision was made that it could be called in, and the discussion seemed to centre about how we can build more homes for rent, which seems to be at odds with the purpose of the Housing and Land Board. But Rob, perhaps you can read out what was finally agreed there.
Okay, so the correspondence I received, Councillor Bird, goes as follows. Dear Councillor Bird, as you know, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee called in the decision of the Housing and Land Delivery Board held on the 2nd of November 2020 relating to the proposals for an affordable housing collaborative vehicle. The reason for the call-in was stated as the panel was not made aware of the extent of need and possibility of specifying a purpose to deliver on social housing requirements. Our concern is that members have not been given the information required to make an informed decision, and that this report unduly fetters the opportunity to use such a vehicle to deliver on the housing need in the region. Thank you for attending Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of November to discuss and answer questions in relation to the above. The committee concluded that, quote, the Affordable Housing Collaborative Delivery Vehicle Progress Update Report be referred back to the Housing and Land Delivery Board for further consideration, in order that the members of the board can be assured that the proposals and the full business case provided sufficient evidence that the proposals would deliver on the intended objectives as stated at this committee by the Chair of the Housing and Land Delivery Board and the Director of Housing and Regeneration. I understand that you will be reconsidering the Affordable Delivery Vehicle report at the next meeting of Housing and Land Delivery Board on the 13th of January, which in accordance with the provisions of the WMCA's constitution, I am able to attend and report on the findings of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Unfortunately, I am not able to attend due to a clash of meetings, but would welcome a summary of the conversation from your reconsideration of this item. And that's from Councillor Trickett.
Yeah, you know, I mean, as far as I'm aware, and I'll repeat what I said, this is work in progress. And as a result, as it hasn't come to a conclusion, I felt that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee call-in was perhaps a bit premature. But having said that, that's a personal opinion. You may wish to make any comment to the board following the letter and conversation that you've just had from Rob Lamond in relation to our position again now for reconsideration.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So what we've done for the board today is we've created a more detailed report than the board received previously, setting out in some length for all members of the board that the history and the context which led to this affordable housing delivery vehicle proposal. We've responded to the overview and scrutiny point on affordable and social housing because this project includes affordable housing against the regional affordable housing definition, which includes the provision of social housing, intermediate other and shared ownership provision. We've included an explicit point, Chair, that the board today is not signing up to any investment by the CA into the vehicle, nor are we committing any land to the vehicle. We are simply agreeing to the business case to establish the principle of the vehicle. That's all that's being asked of the board today. We also have ample opportunity as the board today to work through and consider any key points or assumptions or requirements you would like to add in to the affordable housing delivery vehicle, Chair, because we can put that in the heads of terms for the vehicle. And we're also working through at some length, as colleagues will be aware, we are doing on a similar scheme in Wolverhampton around help to own, on the governance around the vehicle and how that would work in terms of shareholder by WMCA, shareholder by West Midlands Housing Association partnership, to ensure our governance is absolutely robust on this affordable housing delivery vehicle. I suppose, Joe, I just wanted to point out 2 points which were raised in overview and scrutiny that I do think are worth reiterating. One, the affordable housing delivery vehicle will do, must do, and I'm sure under your watch, Chair, it certainly will do, go through all the formal governance of the West Midlands Combined Authority. So if there's any funding, it will come to the investment board chaired by Councillor Slay, and any sign off of the business case will come back to this Housing and Land Board chaired by you in March. So just wanted to reassure the board, firstly, on that point around governance, and secondly, Chair, on the point around affordable housing, the board can be reassured that this affordable housing delivery vehicle is all about additionality. So I know Kevin Rogers is on the call from the West Midlands Housing Association Partnership, but the whole intent behind this delivery vehicle was to go above and beyond what would normally happen on the supply of affordable housing on these sites within the region. That was the intent behind it. That's the purpose. That's how the heads of terms, Rob, are being written, to make sure there is that true additionality. And I'm sure Councillor Bird, you will hold us strongly to that, to make sure that the delivery vehicle does deliver true additionality of affordable housing. So I hope that's just helpful as a sort of a background context, Chair, and to reiterate to you that we have responded in the paper to each of the points raised by overview and scrutiny. Just one final point, Chair, and I'm conscious I'm talking a bit too long, so apologies for that, is on housing need, which was raised at some length by overview and scrutiny. As you're aware, Chair, and the board will be aware, it's local authorities who set housing need within their local plans.
Yes.
The West Midlands Combined Authority has no responsibility for the preparation of local plans and the housing needs assessments that go into them, though we do work incredibly collaboratively with our local authorities to support them on local plan preparation, and the investment that this board has been incredibly successful at securing has helped our local authorities put brownfield first at the heart of their local plans. So apologies, Mike, for talking longer than I normally would, but I hope that's helpful clarity.
It is, and I think it's right and proper that we do take on board what's been said by ONS, because at the end of the day, it is an additionality. It's something that this Housing and Land Board raison d'etre is, of course, to provide housing, and this does give us another arrow in the armour, if you like, or in the quiver, to enable us to look at different ways of providing that housing. I have Angus Lees and Jacqueline Sweetman, Councillor Sweetman, to call. Angus?
Well, yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I concur with you in that we're not being asked to make any decisions at this point in time on this new vehicle. We're merely noting and endorsing and agreeing to the development of a full business case. And I would expect that full business case, before being approved, I would expect that to be something that would go to ONS, because there's more meat on the bone and around that. Now, the only other concern that I have from an ONS point of view is that I think a board is being put together to run this sort of delivery vehicle for affordable housing. And if that's correct, how will that board be held to account, and how will it be scrutinised? Because my understanding is they will be involved in spending public money, and it's rather worrying to have an independent arm's length board or delivery vehicle that's not under the scrutiny of the combined authority. Thank you.
I think that's a point, but I don't think this would, I mean, this is a collaboration of housing associations who themselves are governed by their own constitution as to how they can or can't provide their product through social housing. And I think it would come under that rather than the combined authority. But I'll just take Councillor Sweetman first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a segue of questions that all come together regarding finance, if I may. Firstly, I hear that we're at the planning, the embryonic stage of this business case, which is fantastic because that gives us real opportunity to shape it as we will. But I want to just drill down regarding brownfield sites. As we all know, many of the brownfield sites are financially unviable. Is it the intention that the combined authority will input sufficient funding into the vehicle to offset negative land values around the brownfield sites, and also supply sufficient funding to support development of each of those sites? And this segues into the next question, if I may. The combined authority, I notice, is supplying loan finance. Will the combined authority also be guaranteeing some or all of this loan finance? Have we done any number crunching on that yet? Or obviously that is yet to be put forward in the business case. Thank you.
Chair, would it be okay if I answered that question? Because again, this is a really, really important question that Councillor Sweetman raises, and I want the board to be really clear. The affordable housing delivery vehicle, just like any other project sponsor, which could be a local planning authority, chair, could be a housing association, could be a developer, could be a community group, that's seeking to access brownfield funding from the West Midlands Combined Authority, must go through the single commissioning framework. Yeah. It must meet the requirements of the single commissioning framework in order to access government funding that's been devolved to us for brownfield. Now, as this board has noted before, there are restrictions on that funding around things like the average amount we can put into any individual site across the programme. That is one of the things, as the Chair and the board are well aware from when I've spoken previously, we continue to lobby government hard on to give us more flexibility on how we deploy the funding. But at the moment, if we take the land fund as an example, which is a £100 million fund secured in the March 2018 housing deal, that must deliver 8,000 housing units by the end of the programme. So that works out, just if you're doing the maths, at £12,500 average per unit. And as the Chair will note, at each investment board with Councillor Slay, we give an update on, are we broadly on track to hit that number? And at the moment, Councillor Sweetman, we are broadly on track to hit the 12,500 average unit number across the land fund programme. And again, on loan finance, that would they would have to apply, the vehicle would have to apply for loan finance in the normal way. If it was the residential investment fund or the commercial investment fund, that's run by our fund managers, West Midlands Development Capital, so that the vehicle has been set up in a way that it can only access funding by applying to the single commissioning framework in the normal way that will be signed off by the investment board with the full scrutiny that board and the investment panel brings to scrutiny on finances. So I hope that clarifies the point. And Chair, just on Councillor Lee's point, obviously in terms of governance, any decision making by the West Midlands Combined Authority on this vehicle will report directly into the relevant governance structures within the West Midlands Combined Authority, and any decision making by any statutory officer, for example, on that governance structure, or by yourself, Councillor Bird, on that structure, would report into the relevant decision making group. So it's not like we're creating a brand new board that's just going to make independent decisions. The decision making has to flow back through the combined authority, and with Tim and Carl and Dan's help, one of the bits of work that we are doing is looking at that whole governance piece around this vehicle, just to make sure it's really robust in terms of how decisions are made. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Can you just answer the comment that's been made in the chat by Neil Taylor? What value this will add in relation to housing associations? Why do we need this delivery vehicle? How will it add that additionality? Yeah. Then I'll call Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, no problem. That is set out in the paper, but really happy to amplify that. So the original intent on this, I'm sure Kevin Rogers from the housing associations might want to comment, is there are a number of sites in the region, Chair, that can't be brought forward by any individual developer or individual housing association because the risks are too great. Right. The proposal that was put to us back in early 2018 and then moving into 2019 was by a collection of housing associations working together. The risk is different between themselves, and working with the combined authority is different. Therefore, they will be able to bring forward sites which otherwise would not be able to be brought forward by any individual housing association or individual developer. And that is the market failure test this board set for this vehicle, that it must bring forward sites that would not otherwise come forward by a developer or an individual housing association.
Okay. I'll call Councillor Thompson and then I'll ask the housing associations to add to that. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. It's almost a legacy hand now because Gareth has really answered some of the questions that I had around scrutiny, financials and governance. I think everybody on this board would have to admit that actually having a affordable housing delivery vehicle established is something that we really should be supporting, given the housing need across the different cities and including regions. So it was just that really. So my questions have already been answered by Gareth.
Okay.
So I shall remove my hand.
Okay. Housing Association then, if you want to contribute. I've lost your name, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Chair. Kevin Rogers.
Kevin, thank you.
Yeah, I think Gareth's exactly right. The whole principle of this was, from the very start with these conversations with Homes England and the Combined Authority, the challenge to us was, could we work together to provide more than what was in our business plans and contracts with Homes England? So there was always a clear need for additionality over and above what we were providing through contracts with Homes England. As time's gone over the last couple of years, almost all of the West Midlands housing associations have established strategic partnerships with Homes England. And in 1920, that led to the delivery of 4,268 homes across the wider West Midlands. And I know the report has the DCLG figures, but they're not correct in that instance. Now, the vast majority of those homes, because it's our core business, were social rent and affordable rent, which is 80% of market rents, and shared ownership, which is targeted at those that can't afford access to outright home ownership. So I think for us, when we were working with the Combined Authority in the very early stages, clearly the sites that are not going to be developed by the private sector are those that present the greatest risks and the biggest challenges. So none of us individually could take on that scale of risk, financial and operational and delivery risk. So within the 26 members of the Housing Association Partnership, we decided that the 5 or 6 that had the biggest development programmes and the biggest access to finance would be the ones that became the investing partners. And that's still very much the case. And then looking at the collective and the individual expertise of those areas, within the consortium, we've got expertise across the Black Country, Birmingham and Coventry and Warwickshire and Solihull. We've also got Accord with its timber frame factory. We've got Bromford, who've got an in-house development capacity. And what we decided was, actually, if we came together as a consortium, we could actually deliver anything across the West Midlands. And more importantly for us, in terms of the economic growth ambitions of the Combined Authority, all of the 26 members of the Housing Association Partnership are anchored in the West Midlands, based in the West Midlands, employ West Midlands people, and actually have a vested interest in the delivery of more affordable homes in our own geographical area. So it felt that with the expertise we had across the West Midlands, if we came together and worked with the Combined Authority, we could do something about those problematic sites that we know private sector developers will have viability problems and therefore just won't deliver, or they will deliver homes, but there'll be zero affordable housing. And we all know from conversations on the Housing and Land Board, one of the challenges we've got is too many sites across the West Midlands being delivered with absolutely zero affordable housing because of viability concerns or market concerns, especially in the current environment. So we're still very much committed to the idea of a collaborative vehicle with the Combined Authority. I think where this is a fantastic opportunity is that the Combined Authority works with us on that delivery vehicle. So it's actually a member of the consortium, rather than it just being housing associations come together as a company to contract with the Combined Authority. So frankly, subject to the business case, the delivery vehicle that includes 50% ownership by the Combined Authority can deliver whatever we want, wherever we want. And if you look at the sites across the West Midlands that have been delivered over the last 2 years, the only sites that have had more than 20% affordable housing have been those that have been built out by housing associations in partnership with Homes England. And that's our ambition for this vehicle.
Okay. I've got Councillor Ian Courts, a visitor with his hand up. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested. I was looking at the stats in Solihull, actually, in terms of we have a 40% affordable housing requirement. And in fact, we got near enough 38 in the last full financial year. So we have been delivering, but probably that's on the back of higher land values. I can keep this short, Chairman, because the question I was going to put was, it's not the vehicle and the governance, all that stuff that we should be bothering about. Is, will this proposition develop more sites, more homes? You know, what I've just heard from Kevin and Gareth, frankly, answers my questions. It is about balancing risk. We clearly have to have a good risk assessment process, but you know, I've heard in the last 5 or 10 minutes the best arguments I've heard over about several meetings for why we should just get on and do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Right, I think I've got 2 legacy hands from Councillor Sweetman and Councillor Bradford. Perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Apologies, it is the legacy. Sorry.
Rob, you wish to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just come back on a couple of points, just on the scrutiny overview and scrutiny committee's points, just to clarify in the paper. There's a section. There's 2 kind of box sections in the report, really. One is around the umbrella term affordable housing and making it very clear that social housing, social rented housing, is a big part of that. So just making that point clear that the definition that we're working to very much includes social housing as part of that overall approach, because there was some concern at Overview and Scrutiny Committee that this was potentially only about shared ownership options. So just making that point clear. And also the second box section, which is, and Kevin's already explained this beautifully, but the role of housing associations, really just to be very clear about what the kind of role and remit of housing associations is, and the reason why we're looking to develop this partnership is very much on a kind of shared objective and shared value of the objectives across the organisations to make this work. That's very much its goal, is the kind of social return on investment and the continuing revolving investment throughout the process. So just to make those 2 points absolutely clear.
Well, I think one of the perhaps misunderstandings of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee was the purpose of this board. And you're quite right, it was said, oh, so I see, all you want to do is provide public funds for privately owned houses. Well, to a certain extent, that's possibly true. And this, what we're looking at now with the Housing Association, which is their job, is to assist them in actually taking less the risk, but more of the product. Because at the end of the day, this Housing and Land Board should be proud that we have, in actual fact, exceeded the expectations of government. And that's just not down to the offices, it's everybody who contributes to this and all the developers who do come and take those risks. And what we are doing now is looking at the sites that the developers don't want or believe that risk is too high, and therefore sharing that load, as we've already heard from Gareth and Kevin, to enable us to bring forward housing numbers. So if we can consolidate the comments that have been made today and send that back to Councillor Trickett, I think she might be a little more, well, I hope, a little more settled that we are moving in the way forward, but it is work in progress. Okay, thank you, Gareth. So therefore we accept the report. I'll move on then to item 6, which is zero carbon homes. And this is down to you again, Gareth.
Yeah, it is down to me, Chair, but there's been so much work done on this and very much led by Rachel within the team, working with the new Zero Carbon Homes Task Force that I know many members are aware of. So I'll ask Rachel to introduce it, and obviously links very closely to the 2041 agenda that Councillor Courts is driving through. So Rachel, if you're happy to introduce your paper.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Ooh. Sorry, I'm using new technology today. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gareth. So today we're presenting 2 documents, Zero Carbon Homes Charter and Zero Carbon Homes Route Map. Both of these items were agreed as key deliverables for 2020-21 at last year's April meeting, within a work programme aiming to deliver zero carbon homes by 2025. As Gareth said, we've been producing these documents with both local authorities and the expert task force over the autumn-winter months to ensure they reflect local and national aspirations and priorities, as well as deliver our 2041 goals. So a quick overview of both documents. The Charter is a vision setting document describing the best practice scenario for homes, places and people. The route map sets out the ways in which WMCA can drive the region towards that standard over the next 10 years, and it's underpinned by specific targets and actions. As a reminder, we adopted UK GBC's definition of zero carbon buildings at that April meeting, and this is the definition both of these documents work towards. I say work towards because that definition is a framework, and net zero whole life emissions, which is sort of the end goal there, is not currently achievable. So for this reason, the route map recommends phase targets which are in line with other industry leading route maps, including those from the RIBA and LETI. For the purpose of the 2025 standard that we've agreed, we're focusing on operational emissions and then looking to embodied emissions towards the end of the decade, and finally net zero whole life. This said, we view the route map as a live document. It sets out a clear path to meet net zero by 2041, which is sufficiently aspirational while still being deliverable. There is scope to either raise our aspirations or amend our approach if it seems appropriate and necessary to do so. And please also note that both the Charter and the route map are policy guidance. There is no legal or financial commitment to the recommendations, and any such commitments in the future will be agreed by the relevant decision-making board. We're asking the board to discuss and agree both of these documents. You'll note they're well progressed and finalised in terms of presentation and content. Therefore, subject to board agreement, we're also seeking delegated authority for the Chair and Director of Housing and Land to agree any final amendments on the back of this meeting in readiness for publication. And that's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Well, it's certainly a very a busy presentation, if I may say so. It's a very comprehensive report. And I think what we are seeing now is that critical mass of housing providers coming together now to look at different and alternative ways of providing zero carbon homes, whether they be modular build or whether they be better insulated or whatever. I think we then will perhaps move towards seeing how we can retrofit some of the houses, which has been done to a certain extent by energy companies. But I think what we need to do is to see how, in actual fact, we can expand what we got. Ian, this is Ian Courts, that is. This is one of your pet projects, if I may, without being rude.
Yeah, I think pet is, you know, I haven't worked on the development of this, but I thoroughly support it. I've made comments before about zero carbon homes ought to be an essential. You know, it's just something we must do now. But there are different cost parameters in how you do it. And I've actually got a question on that, because with some sites that we've looked at, admittedly relatively small sites in Solihull, you can get a cost difference between different types. You know, is it passive homes or other stuff? Massive amount, you know, tens of thousands of pounds. And I think one needs to be realistic about this. So certainly I support it as a principle. There's one issue here which is about whole life, and there's, you know, clearly the whole construction process is a very energy inefficient one. But I would like to ask about the role of offsets in this, because we seem to say, oh, we mustn't offset, we've got to do it all ourselves. But the realities are some developers are adopting, saying, well, I can't do anything about the energy consumed in construction. What I'm doing is other things. And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, we sort of are obsessed with, as we should be, with reducing carbon in this country. But if you actually looked at one of the program about Venezuela, you know, other countries, what they need to do is just enormous. So we cannot bankrupt our process, and we cannot you know, make sites unviable for this. But I'd just like some comments on the viability aspects of this, please, because this is a massively important project, you know, and we've got to get on with it. But the viability is key. Can you just comment on that, please?
Rachel, do you want to pick that up, or Gareth? Rachel?
Yeah, okay, I'll start. So we have built that into the route map. I'm not saying that it's going to be cost neutral just because we start with operational, you know, it's not. And we understand that. One of the things that we need to look at over the coming months is how we can begin to bring those down, and what a combined authority's role might be in that. As you said, with Passive House, there are sort of huge challenges in delivering it. What you'll see is that after it's around 4 years of experience delivering Passive House, people begin to bring those costs down, and there are designers that are able to do that from the outset. So we need to think about who we work with, but it is a challenge and it will require more funding. And then in terms of offsets, there is reference in the route map to an agreed allowable offset. And that's something that we also need to bring back to board in the future. Generally, if you are looking at offsetting, you are literally just offsetting the impacts. That's the issue with it. And you're not reducing the carbon emissions of housing. But when it comes to particularly embodied carbon, it can be difficult to get back to zero carbon. So we have to understand that at some point there will be an offset. What we can't do is commit to operational net zero carbon, and then say that actually developers can offset the amount of carbon that they don't emit from operational emissions, because that's irresponsible. Should we say that's something that we can tackle, but at some point in the future there will be an issue. We can also consider how we'd offset that. Is it a commitment to a retrofit fund, so there are better carbon impacts within the region? We don't have renewable energy. So my response really is we don't have the answer to it yet, but we have considered where it's built into the route map, and it's something that we need to discuss over the coming year, really, for rapid action. Gareth, do you have anything to add?
Okay. I have Peter Butling, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think I've banged on about this before, but I do find the kind of zero carbon housing and affordable housing something of an oxymoron. If you go for passive housing and basically kind of a highly insulated new build, you're looking at 120% of a normal conventional build. If you go towards basically kind of a conventional build with kind of, let's go say for the first instance, air source heat pumps. Now, an air source heat pump can cost you between £8,000 and £18,000 per installation. The average gas boiler costs you £1,000. So you're looking at somewhere in the region of 10 times plus cost per unit just for the boiler for a heating system. Now, if you go for ground source heat pumps, and I've got all the figures here, it can cost up to somewhere between £20,000 to £40,000 per unit installed. So, you know, when you kind of there you are trying on one hand, and the previous paper trying to kind of deliver affordable housing, and then you're trying to deliver zero carbon housing. As I pointed out, it's something of an oxymoron and almost, but fortunately it's way back into 2050 in terms of the target, but the technology, to be perfectly honest, and the affordability is not there. So on a kind of a more immediate basis, my concerns are about affordable housing and not necessarily about kind of pursuing full tilt zero carbon. We do what we can with the technologies we've got now, but we've got to wait for some technologies to come down the line that are going to make this proposal affordable. And I'm more concerned about affordability than ever I am about zero carbon, to be perfectly honest. So that's my input. But these are figures that you can quite easily look at in terms of kind of alternative sources of heating or passive heating, but they're all very, very expensive. And so we need to kind of be keeping an eye on the new technologies coming down the road at a later date.
Ian, do you wish to come back, Ian Courts?
Well, yes, just this issue of affordability. I mean, to a certain extent, Peter, I was partly, being cautious about that myself. But it's not as simple as what you say. In reality, in many areas, the price of extra insulation or whatever it will going to be comes out of the price of the land. It just means a landowner, instead of making 2 million, is going to make 1.5 million. I'm sorry. I think in that case, I'm going to put this as a priority. There may be issues in low-priced areas of affordability, and I think the paper really takes account of that. But unless we set these standards, I remember objecting to, I think it was Part M regulations some years ago for various. But in actual fact, now would anyone dispute things like that? We have to move forward, but be realistic.
Okay, Rachel.
Just to bring in a further point as well on affordability, and to think about affordability of these homes over their whole cost, we need to rethink about how we value things. From a previous report we brought to this board, which was the baseline gap analysis, we estimated the cost to be about 10,000 per each unit additional, but that was taking each technology individually, which raised the price, and also looking at single units. At scale, this comes down massively. What we did find from that report, though, was we were looking at least how halving people's occupational costs in those homes. So there are benefits that you don't see at the initial point, and there's also in this route map we've looked at the skill side as well. So whilst that that cost per unit for the developer can seem particularly high, we need to acknowledge that, one, there are people that can do this already at cost. There might not be huge numbers of them, but they are able to do it, so we know it's feasible. That we're looking at a much greater scale, and that we also need to consider the implications beyond just the cost of building the units as our role as a combined authority.
Darren?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question. I've also got an observation. I think I would follow very heavily what Ian's got to say. There isn't a choice about delivering zero carbon homes or zero carbon commercial development, for that matter. We've all made that decision, and to be blunt, the market has to deal with that. And if that means the landowners take a wash, get a haircut on it, so be it. Developers will be smart enough to deliver this. We have to hold our nerve about this stuff. This is what we have to deliver, and then it's for smart people who tell us they're really smart as developers and entrepreneurs to make it work. It's not for us to row back on it just because it might be in the quite difficult box for the Persimmons of this world. Practical question, Rachel. Tomorrow, Stratford District Council and Warwick District Council holds its first meeting to embark on an entirely new core strategy. How do I get this embedded? How do I get you to work alongside our policy officers across both district councils to make sure that we give life to this? Because I'm at the passive house now, negotiate me down from their kind of position for a new core strategy. How can we work alongside the work that you're doing here to give life in our two districts to achieving this before anybody else in the West Midlands Combined Authority? Serious question, Rachel. What can we do on a practical level? We're about to start a new core strategy. What can we do with working with you guys?
We have got officers from both Stratford and Warwick in the working group for this already, and they are very committed to that work. I will say, I can link up with them outside of this meeting if you'd like, and we can talk about how we.
Right answer, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Okay, Gareth, do you wish to wrap this up?
Yeah, if I may, Mike, and I think this goes back to the terms of reference of the board, if I may. So one of the things that the Housing and Land Board has been looking to do since I've been involved is not just to secure funding to unlock delivery, but also to improve the quality of housing and to be on the front foot of national trends and national agendas. We've done that really successfully within this board through advanced manufacturing and construction, where we really are leading the way collectively around this agenda. And just coming back on the affordable housing, that members of this board will remember the I don't know what the right word is, the pushback when we first suggested that the combined authority would impose a 20% affordable housing requirement on all investments, but the board here made the decision to make that an obligation. And coming back to Councillor Pemberton's point, developers have responded because they know they won't get funding unless they provide 20% affordable housing on CA schemes, so they know not to apply if they won't, and that's been really palpable in terms of the impact it's had, as has the modular construction. And I'm confident we'll see something similar on zero carbon homes with the clear direction this board is making. And I think, Chair, it goes back to the point you've been making at previous boards about how can we leverage the funding we're securing to deliver what much wider benefits for communities and for the region as a whole. So I think this is another step towards not just securing funding for housing delivery and employment delivery, but for changing the quality of that delivery and what comes the other side. Can I just respond to Councillor Butler's point? I think we do need to closely monitor this, Rachel, as we have done with the AMC and the affordable housing every step of the way, to just constantly check back into the board, Chair, that the assumptions we're making here are proving in reality. Yeah. So I do think we should commit, Rachel, to a regular update back to this board on how this is working out in practice, in reality on the ground.
I think coming back to the comment made by Peter, and indeed supported in the chat by Ian Court, it is a matter of scale. And I remember not so long ago when people shunned against modular build. You know, going back only 3 or 4 years, modular build was, oh, no, we can't do that. But I think it's a great report, and I thank you for that input. As far as I'm aware, I think we've covered everything. So can I say thank you for attending?
Mike, can I just say something for the notes? So since the board last met, I'm delighted to say that the combined authority was successful in a national competition for brownfield funding. £40 million was made available nationally, and delighted to report to the board that the combined authority secured £24 million of that 40 million. So well over 50% of the whole national pot has been secured by the West Midlands Combined Authority, and I thank the whole of this board for their work, which has very much been at the forefront of government's confidence in our ability to deliver. So I think that's a huge credit to this board and the work that's happened. So thanks very much,
Gareth. I think everybody, everybody who contributes into this board does it for the purpose of providing housing, which unfortunately sometimes politics creep into it in other areas, but I don't think we have that here. Well, thank you for that, and I'll see you again soon. Gareth, can you give me a call?